They mocked her, calling her reckless and naive when she decided to adopt not one but 3 orphaned wolf cubs. 5 years later, those same critics are eating their words. What could have driven a person to bring these wild creatures into her home? And how did this extraordinary decision transform both her life and the fate of the cubs? On the outskirts of a small, close-knit town, rumors spread quickly and often, fueled by the curiosity of neighbors. So, when a solitary woman named Evelyn announced her plan to adopt 3 orphaned wolf cubs, it didn't take long for the whispers to begin. Some labeled her decision irresponsible. Others viewed it as outright dangerous. Her few even questioned her sanity, wondering how someone could welcome wild predators into their home. Yet, behind the raised eyebrows and hushed gossip lay a deeper truth about Evelyn's character. Having grown up next to vast woodlands, she had always felt a profound kinship with the wild. As a child, she spent countless hours exploring hidden trails, listening to the symphony of rustling leaves and distant howls, forming a bond with nature that few could fully understand. It was this bond that guided her to intervene when she discovered 3 orphaned wolf cubs on the brink of starvation, left vulnerable by circumstances she could only guess at. The sight of their frail, trembling forms awakened in her a protective instinct, one that overrode every warning of danger she'd ever heard. The initial reactions were as brutal as they were predictable. Close friends distanced themselves out of fear. Local media ran sensational headlines, and community forums lit up with debates over the legality and moral implications of her choice. Yet, Evelyn stood firm, fueled by a quiet conviction that she was doing the right thing. She prepared a space in her secluded cabin, gathering everything from specialized diets to enrichment activities that would honor the wolves' natural instincts while keeping them and the neighborhood safe. What began as a rescue mission soon evolved into an extraordinary journey, one that would test Evelyn's resolve and question everything people assumed about human-wolf relationships. 5 years later, the outcome left the naysayers speechless. This story, woven from threads of skepticism, dedication, and a surprising twist, demonstrates that sometimes the bravest decisions come from following a calling others can't comprehend. Join us as we step into Evelyn's world, discovering how she balanced trust, caution, and maternal devotion, and how her bond with 3 wild creatures shook the foundation of an entire community. Will her daring act stand as an inspiration or a cautionary tale? Stay tuned to uncover the truth behind the wolves' remarkable transformation, and the day everyone finally realized they had been wrong about Evelyn all along. Evelyn's decision to bring 3 orphaned wolf cubs into her life began with a single act of empathy, though it would soon spiral into an all-consuming commitment. Before the cubs arrived at her secluded cabin, she'd spent days preparing the space, crafting a special enclosure lined with soft bedding, acquiring specialized nutritional formulas intended for young canines, and consulting every resource she could find on wolf behavior. Despite the pointed criticism and dire warnings from friends and strangers alike, she felt an inexplicable sense of purpose guiding her. There was no turning back. Something deep within her heart insisted that these wolves were meant to be part of her life. The arrival of the cubs was both thrilling and terrifying. They were small, frail bundles of fur, each with wide but inquisitive eyes and a timid posture that betrayed just how vulnerable they truly were. Their fur was patchy, their bones too easily felt beneath the skin. It was clear that they had barely survived for days after losing their mother, and their initial wariness of Evelyn was immediate. Whenever she approached, they huddled together, emitting sharp, plaintive whimpers that tore at her resolve. Yet amid her own nervousness, Evelyn managed a calming voice, offering gentle coos and soft murmurs of reassurance to ease their fear. Within the first week, she discovered that raising wolf cubs demanded a level of vigilance beyond anything she'd imagined. Their feeding schedule was relentless, requiring bottle feeding at odd hours of the night. Each cub had its own distinct personality. The largest one, whom she tentatively named Ash, was bold and eager to explore, while the smaller ones, Frost and Willow, were more reserved, clinging to each other whenever Evelyn wasn't nearby. Simple tasks like cleaning their enclosure or replenishing water became delicate operations, requiring her to balance her desire to bond with them against their instinctive wariness. Every moment carried an undercurrent of tension, One misstep, and their fragile trust might collapse under the weight of their primal fear. News of her eccentric choice quickly spread through the nearby town, a place where novelty could rarely hide for long. At the local diner, where neighbors often converged to share gossip, whispers circulated about the woman with the wolves. Some labeled her a danger to the community, warning that once the cubs matured, they would become a lethal threat. Others sneered that it was a vanity project, an attempt by a lonely soul to court attention through outrageous means. A handful of voices, though quieter, spoke up in her defense, recalling how Evelyn had always been a compassionate spirit who extended kindness to all living beings, no matter how misunderstood they might be. As the weeks turned into months, the cubs' growth accelerated rapidly. Ash, the boldest of the three, was the first to probe the limits of their enclosure. Testing every latch and corner, Frost grew increasingly curious and would watch Evelyn closely, mimicking her actions, tilting his head when she spoke, showing interest in the items she carried. Willow remained the most timid, often relying on Ash to guide her explorations. But even she gradually warmed to Evelyn's presence, gingerly accepting treats from her hand and occasionally allowing a gentle scratch behind the ears. Each small milestone, a wag of a tail, a curious lick, felt like a monumental step toward bridging the gap between the wild and the domestic. During this period, Evelyn wrestled with her own emotional roller coaster. She was overwhelmed by the ceaseless responsibilities of caring for three rapidly growing predators. Sleep became an elusive luxury, replaced by the necessity of constant supervision, vigilant training, and frequent cleanup sessions that tested her patience. Yet whenever exhaustion threatened to erode her determination, she recalled the helpless whimpers she'd first heard when she discovered the cubs, and the unwavering devotion in their eyes whenever they turned to her for comfort. These reflections strengthened her resolve, fueling her commitment to see the mission through. Not long after the cubs' third month under her care, a stark challenge emerged that would test Evelyn's readiness. The dynamic nature of wolf packs means that hierarchical structures solidify quickly. As Ash, Frost, and Willow grew stronger, hints of dominance behavior surfaced, particularly between Ash and Frost. The siblings began to tussle in ways that were far more intense than mere play, their snouts curling back to reveal small but sharp teeth. Evelyn found herself torn. She wanted the cubs to maintain their natural instincts, but also needed to ensure the safety of both the wolves and her neighbors. Balancing discipline with respect for their inherent wildness became a tightrope walk, and a single misjudgment could have catastrophic consequences, affirming the critics who said it was only a matter of time before tragedy struck. Around this time, Evelyn reached out to a wildlife behaviorist from a nearby university, seeking mentorship on how best to nurture the wolves' growth while maintaining control. The behaviorist, and herself skeptical of the endeavor, was surprised by the sincerity and patience evident in Evelyn's approach. After an initial assessment, she remarked, "You're essentially raising them in a borderland between civilization and the wild, and it's no easy feat. They will never be fully domesticated, and you must accept the limitations of that." These words underscored the fragile balance Evelyn was attempting to maintain. Still, in spite of the mounting challenges and the looming sense of uncertainty, the bond between Evelyn and the cubs deepened in ways no one had foreseen. Each day, they explored the dense woodlands around her cabin, venturing farther into the wild while always returning to the sanctuary that Evelyn provided. It was a routine that gradually molded them into a family, one defined not by species, but by trust and shared survival. Yet the question remained, could this unconventional unity withstand the inevitable pressure from the outside world, where doubt, fear, and regulations threatened to tear apart what they had so painstakingly built? In the months that followed, the wolf cubs, Ash and Frost and Willow, grew more confident and robust, each showcasing a distinct personality that both charmed and unnerved the townspeople. Evelyn's secluded cabin, once quiet and unassuming, became a hub of curiosity and controversy. Neighbors, drawn by the novelty of seeing three young wolves interact with a human caregiver, would stop by unannounced, hoping to catch a glimpse of the growing predators. Many approached out of genuine fascination, but an undercurrent of fear and skepticism lingered, fueled by rumors that these wolves, when fully grown, would pose a grave danger. The local media, quick to latch onto any unusual story, started running sensational headlines. Articles bearing titles like "The Wolf Lady, Naive or Trailblazer," and "Wolves in Our Midst, a Threat to Public Safety" circulated, painting a polarizing image of Evelyn. Some reporters lauded her compassion and dedication, depicting her as a modern-day guardian of nature. Others framed her as a delusional idealist or, worse, a reckless lawbreaker who was playing with wildfire in the guise of canines. As word spread, more voices joined the debate, turning Evelyn's rural home into a focal point of both admiration and scorn. Despite the external clamor, life within the cabin settled into a daily rhythm that slowly forged a strong bond between Evelyn and her lupine wards. Each morning, she rose at dawn to feed the cubs a specialized diet that mimicked their natural nutritional needs. Her afternoons were spent in the adjoining woodland, where she helped them develop their instincts, allowing them to track small animals under supervision, teaching them to navigate tricky terrain, and introducing them to water sources. Evelyn's intention was never to domesticate the wolves fully, but to nurture their wildness in a manner that respected both their nature and the human world they inhabited. Still, she couldn't ignore the simmering question: how long could they truly coexist on this tightrope between civilization and the wilderness? At about 1 year old, the cubs began exhibiting adolescent tendencies, testing boundaries, exploring further, and asserting their individuality. Ash, the largest, emerged as the de facto pack leader. He was bold, prone to challenging any perceived constraints, and occasionally displayed aggression when he felt cornered. Frost, though equally curious, was more cautious, often watching from a distance before engaging in new activities. Willow, the smallest and most reserved, clung closely to Evelyn whenever uncertainty arose, as if seeking reassurance in her presence. Observing these shifts, the wildlife behaviorist who had taken an interest in Evelyn's situation issued a cautionary note. As they mature, their pack dynamics will solidify. You'll need to be prepared for the reality that they are, at heart, still wolves, bonded to you, but not domesticated dogs. This reality check loomed larger when a neighbor's sheep went missing under suspicious circumstances. Although no direct evidence pointed to Evelyn's wolves, rumors circulated like wildfire, accusing the trio of predation. Angry calls poured into local radio shows, and the small-town rumor mill churned out tales of packs of feral wolves raiding farms. Evelyn, incensed at the baseless accusations, worked tirelessly to prove her wolves' innocence, offering security camera footage and evidence of the times her cubs had been securely penned during the supposed incident. Nevertheless, the tension escalated, revealing the fragile acceptance her neighbors had granted. Some began to lobby local officials, insisting on stricter regulations or even the removal of the wolves from Evelyn's care. Feeling the weight of public scrutiny, Evelyn found solace in the quiet affirmation of the daily life she shared with Ash, Frost, and Willow. Each evening, she would sit on her cabin's porch, watching them frolic at the forest edge, testing their budding independence yet always returning to her side. The sight of them, tails wagging and eyes alight, reminded her why she had chosen this unconventional path. It wasn't merely about rescuing 3 orphaned animals. It was about preserving a link to the wild that so many people seemed to fear or misunderstand. Through social media, a handful of supporters rallied to her side. People who valued the idea of coexisting with nature's fiercer inhabitants. They shared her photos and stories under hashtags like Chachas Wolvesandis and Nature Coexistence, sparking debates about whether such relationships could be sustainably maintained. I believe what Evelyn's doing is a test case for how humans and wild animals might learn mutual respect, wrote one online commentator. Yet for every supportive voice, a skeptic or alarmist emerged, warning that the wolves would inevitably revert to their predatory instincts. Behind the scenes, legal obstacles began to mount. A few local officials, influenced by vocal detractors, cited public safety concerns, questioning whether Evelyn had the proper permits or if regulations existed for raising apex predators in a domestic setting. The question of reintroducing the wolves to the wild also gained traction. Some believed that once they were fully grown, The only responsible option would be to release them into a designated wildlife sanctuary or a rewilding program. Evelyn found herself at a crossroads. As the wolves inched closer to adulthood, the tension between her intention to keep them safe and the reality of their innate wildness threatened to tear her carefully built world apart. It was around this time that a seemingly innocuous visit from a local television crew changed the narrative yet again. A reporter came to film a segment about the Wolf Lady, expecting to sensationalize the story of a lone woman living with predators. Instead, they captured a deeply moving moment. Ash, despite his now formidable size, gently nuzzling Evelyn's hand, a sign of affection and trust. Frost and Willow, cautiously but undeniably, accepted treats from her palm. The footage, broadcast locally and then shared widely online, sparked a wave of reconsideration. People saw that these wolves were not mindless beasts, but sentient creatures that recognized and even cherished Evelyn's care. It was a fleeting triumph, but one that sowed seeds of doubt among her harshest critics. Nonetheless, as the wolves neared their 2-year mark, the fragility of their coexistence with humanity became more apparent. The burdens of fear, rumor, and official scrutiny loomed ever larger, and the wolves themselves, now at an age where territorial instincts came to the fore, tested the boundaries of Evelyn's property with increasing frequency. Their howls at night, a chorus that once sounded like a lullaby to Evelyn, grew powerful and resonant, echoes of a wild realm that neither empathy nor legal regulations could fully tame. Does this block work for you? Shall I move on to development 3? Hai detto, procedi ChatGPT ha detto, ho ragionato per un secondo development 3, 800 words. First twist or major revelation. Not long after the local TV segment on The Wolf Lady aired, a wave of cautious optimism swept through the community. Some of Evelyn's fiercest critics softened their stance upon seeing how the wolves interacted with her and how attentively she cared for them. Online, a small but vocal group of supporters began advocating for a formal program that would allow Evelyn to keep the wolves under specific guidelines, arguing that her success could serve as a blueprint for responsible human-wildlife relationships. However, just as tensions seemed to ease, an unforeseen twist threatened to unravel the delicate progress Evelyn had made. It began with a series of unsettling events. Small livestock, belonging to a few nervous farmers, started going missing under mysterious circumstances. Although no direct evidence pointed to Evelyn's wolves, the community's collective memory of prior rumors reignited suspicions. The local radio station, which had once told her story with a mix of skepticism and curiosity, now amplified accusations that the wolves had reverted to their predatory nature. Evelyn was beside herself with worry. She knew that Ash, Frost, and Willow were capable of hunting if truly desperate, but she had meticulously tracked their movements via feeding schedules and frequent check-ins to ensure they never needed to roam for food. Even so, the livestock losses stacked up ominously, and fear began to overshadow compassion among many of the town's residents. Determined to clear her wolves' names, Evelyn started investigating the disappearances on her own. She gathered photographic evidence of tracks that, to her eye, didn't match those of her wolves, smaller footprints, and spaced differently from the measured stride of a wolf. Most perplexing was the presence of odd scratch marks and clumps of dark fur left behind at the scenes. One evening, as she combed the outskirts of a farm that had recently lost a sheep, she stumbled upon what looked like a patch of rough, matted fur snagged on a fence. Under the dim light of her flashlight, it was clear that this fur was black and coarse, different from the lighter coats of her wolves. The moment felt like a revelation, a shred of tangible proof that might exonerate Ash, Frost, and Willow. Evelyn bagged the fur, her heart pounding with excitement at the thought of presenting this evidence to the local authorities. But as she studied the fence more closely, a chill ran down her spine. The scratch marks bore an uncanny resemblance to those made by a much larger predator, possibly a bear or a rogue dog. But a deeper suspicion nagged at her, hinting that something even more unusual might be prowling these woods. The next day, Evelyn shared her findings with Officer Ryan, the local law enforcement official who had once warned her about the risks of raising wild wolves. Though originally skeptical of her endeavor, He'd softened after witnessing the bond she had formed with the cubs. Examining the fur, he admitted it didn't match that of Evelyn's wolves. "This doesn't solve our problem," he cautioned, "but it does suggest that we might be dealing with something else, maybe even an unknown or hybrid predator." His words sent a ripple of anxiety through Evelyn. If another predator was indeed responsible for the livestock killings, the town's suspicion could lead to reckless vigilantism that might endanger her wolves regardless. Simultaneously, the local rumor mill latched onto theories of a mysterious beast roaming the woods, an idea fueled by scattered sightings of a large, dark creature at night. Some even suggested that the beast could be the result of clandestine breeding experiments, an illegal cross between a domestic dog and a wild apex predator. Online forums buzzed with speculation, merging sensationalism with real concerns about public safety. While a segment of the community doubled down on blaming Evelyn's wolves, an increasing number of open-minded residents began to suspect a hidden threat that had nothing to do with her. The tension rose sharply, with many demanding immediate action from law enforcement to safeguard farms and families. Fearing for the wolves' safety, Evelyn intensified her precautions. She expanded the fenced enclosure around her property, adding a system of cameras to monitor any nighttime intruders. To quell the community's concerns, she invited several skeptical neighbors to visit her cabin and see how meticulously she managed the wolves' diet, exercise, and social interactions. For some, the experience of watching Ash, Frost, and Willow romp together, occasionally licking Evelyn's hand or trotting at her heel, was transformative. They left, if not fully convinced, then at least open to the possibility that these particular wolves were not the monsters they'd feared. But just as the tide of public opinion seemed to be turning, another shock rippled through the town. A local teenager disappeared near the woods. Search parties were organized, spreading out in all directions. The tragedy immediately revived people's worst fears. Though there was no direct evidence linking the wolves to the teen's disappearance, an outcry erupted on social media, urging authorities to handle the wolf problem before more harm befell the town. Old divisions re-emerged, fueled by panic and a thirst for easy answers. Trolls posted inflammatory messages, and sensational headlines revived doubts about Evelyn's entire project. Once again, she found herself on the defensive, fighting to protect her wolves from knee-jerk condemnation. Officer Ryan stepped in, reminding everyone that the missing teen could have encountered any number of dangers in the wild, ranging from accidents to genuine predator attacks by creatures entirely unrelated to Evelyn's pack. A formal investigation launched, combing through every lead. But the tension among the townspeople soared to new heights. Whispers of vigilante action began circulating, and more than one shot fired in the dead of night had people questioning whether a misguided hunter might soon set his sights on Ash, Frost, or Willow. Caught in a maelstrom of suspicion and fear, Evelyn wrestled with grief, anger, and an unshakable devotion to the wolves she considered her family. This was no longer a mere dispute over whether or not she could keep them. It had become a fight for their very survival, and possibly her own credibility. As her daily routine of feeding, grooming, and training continued, the question loomed: could her bond with the wolves withstand the storm of terror and mistrust that now engulfed the town? Unbeknownst to all but a select few, a crucial piece of evidence was about to surface that would either vindicate the wolves completely or seal their fate forever. Dark clouds rolled in over the small town, casting a somber pall that mirrored the tense undercurrents gripping its residents. In the aftermath of the teenager's disappearance, apprehension thickened the air like the hush before a thunderstorm. At her secluded cabin, Evelyn paced restlessly, torn between a mounting fear for the wolves she loved and a gnawing worry for the missing teen. Every rumor she overheard in town, muttered behind lowered voices at the diner or splashed across local social media, stirred her anxieties. Her heart clenched at the thought that any tragedy could be pinned on her beloved Ash, Frost, and Willow. The pack, still innocent in their own eyes, sensed their caretaker's mounting distress. Ash, the largest and most spirited, began patrolling the fenced perimeter more frequently, reacting to Evelyn's tense posture with an alert vigilance. Frost and Willow, picking up on the charged atmosphere, clung closer to their adoptive mother whenever she moved through the property. Even the routine feeding times felt different now. An undercurrent of urgency and protectiveness replaced the once playful atmosphere of mealtime. The wolves themselves seemed to know something was amiss beyond their enclosure, though they couldn't articulate the complexities of a human community on edge. Amid these concerns, the wildlife behaviorist who had previously advised Evelyn returned for another visit. A woman of few words and sharp observations, she meticulously noted how Ash had become more defensive, occasionally baring his teeth at unfamiliar noises. "They're reacting to your tension," the behaviorist explained. "Wolves are highly attuned to emotional states, especially those they've bonded with. If you're anxious or afraid, they'll respond in kind, even escalating protective behaviors." The words reinforced Evelyn's resolve to maintain a calm exterior, recognizing that her emotional composure had a direct bearing on how the pack behaved. Yet, the weight of the town's suspicions and the missing teen crisis bore down on her. Making composure a challenge she wrestled with each passing day. The local authorities, meanwhile, grew more assertive in their scrutiny. With public calls for swift action mounting, they increased patrols near Evelyn's property and in the forest beyond. At night, the beam of flashlights sometimes danced along the tree line, accompanied by the low murmur of law enforcement communicating via radio. The presence of uniformed officers unsettled both the wolves and Evelyn, but the real risk lay in how the community's panic might embolden more extreme measures. One morning, a bullet hole was discovered in a fence post near the enclosure. Though no one claimed responsibility, the message was clear. Some individuals had taken it upon themselves to deal with what they perceived as a growing threat. Throughout this turmoil, Emily and her family, Evelyn's main allies, organized a series of small gatherings at their home. They invited skeptical townspeople and local media to witness how Evelyn interacted with the wolves, hoping to dispel fears through open dialogue and transparency. During these informal sessions, the cubs, now large, strong subadults, would cautiously approach guests under Evelyn's supervision, demonstrating that they could be gentle and responsive to her cues. Some visitors left, visibly moved by the sight of Ash nuzzling Evelyn's hand, or Frost carefully accepting a snack from her palm, their perceptions of savage beasts conflicted by the affectionate display. But for many others, the wolves' sheer size and intense eyes reinforced their latent fears. "It only takes one snap," they'd mutter, retreating with uncertain expressions. The tension between empathy and primal apprehension proved difficult to overcome. In the midst of these emotional struggles, a faint glimmer of hope arrived. Officer Ryan, who had once harbored serious reservations about Evelyn's project, found potential evidence that could exonerate the wolves from the teen's disappearance. During a search near the river, he discovered footprints and scattered belongings that hinted the missing teenager might have traveled far beyond the wolves' usual territory. The footprints were more consistent with human activity than with prowling predators, and there were no signs of wolf tracks in the vicinity. While not definitive, the clue bolstered Evelyn's confidence that her pack was not to blame. She prayed that the search would yield a resolution, a safe return of the teen, or at least answers that would quell the town's fears. Nonetheless, the specter of corporate or rogue predation continued to loom. The camera footage Evelyn had compiled still showed glimpses of a large, dark-furred creature roaming the outskirts of nearby properties, a figure that didn't match her wolves' distinct coats. Despite sharing this footage with local authorities, progress in identifying the mysterious predator was slow. Meanwhile, tensions in town escalated, with many residents insisting on immediate culling of any wolves perceived to be a threat. "We can't wait around while something prowls our woods," a local farmer protested at a town meeting. "If it's not her wolves, it's some other beast. Either way, we're not safe." Under the oppressive weight of suspicion, Evelyn's convictions wavered. Late at night, in the hushed sanctuary of her cabin, she pondered drastic measures, surrendering the wolves to a wildlife sanctuary or relocating them far from a community that refused to accept them. Each idea felt like betrayal. She had promised the cubs, from the time they were small and helpless, that she would care for them and keep them safe. The thought of giving up that responsibility gnawed at her soul, yet watching them pace and grow restless within their enclosure reminded her that the tension was taking a toll on them as well. Jack, ever the meticulous observer, recognized that the path forward would require a decisive confrontation, a revelation or event that would force the town to confront its misconceptions head-on. In hushed, thoughtful conversations with Emily and the wildlife behaviorist, he hypothesized that the real predator, the unknown creature captured only in fleeting, dark clips, might resurface in a way that provided proof of the wolves' innocence. Yet, the possibility that such a confrontation could escalate into violence weighed heavily on them all. The choice of whether to proactively hunt this creature down or to wait for it to strike again was fraught with moral complexity. Evelyn, her eyes red from sleepless nights, firmly opposed any lethal approach. "Two wrongs don't make a right," she'd say. "We protect life. We don't end it." As the weight of these decisions pressed down like a storm cloud, the bond between Evelyn and her wolves remained her only constant. Each morning, the pack greeted her with unwavering trust, searching her gaze for a reassurance she wasn't always sure she could provide. And each evening, the howls that resonated from her property, once an enchanting lullaby, became a haunting reminder that time was running out to resolve the crisis. Unbeknownst to all but a handful of allies, a chain of events was about to unfold that would push everyone, man and beast alike, to a final, dramatic turning point in their quest to live free from fear. A creeping sense of urgency began to settle over the town, as each passing day brought more questions than answers. Evelyn, still determined to defend her three beloved wolves, Ash, Frost, and Willow, found her steadfast conviction tested by an unsettling series of events. The local authorities had so far failed to identify the large, dark-furred creature caught on camera near the missing teen's last known location, leaving everyone on edge. Meanwhile, rumors about the wolves continued to swirl. The repeated sightings of a mysterious predator at night cast a long shadow over the entire community and reopened the question: could some hidden force be exacerbating human-wolf tensions? The tension in local public forums and social media soared as new theories emerged. Under hashtags like Jojo Wolf Controversy and Unknown Predator, armchair detectives proposed explanations ranging from an escaped zoo animal to a clandestine breeding experiment meant to produce a more fearsome apex predator. One particularly unnerving theory claimed that Evelyn's wolves might be forming an alliance with the unidentified creature, broadcasting that her entire rescue effort was part of an elaborate, albeit bizarre, ruse. Although rational minds dismissed such outlandish claims, they nonetheless fueled the fires of public doubt. As old rumors merged with new conspiracies, the line between reality and sensationalism blurred dangerously. Amid the growing tension, a reclusive neighbor emerged as an unexpected subplot. Mr. Miller, a stooped older man who lived off a long dirt road, far from any neighbors, reported a series of strange disturbances on his property. Late at night, he'd hear guttural snarls, followed by the panicked bleating of small animals. On 2 occasions, he'd awakened to find the carcasses of wild deer near his porch, as if some predator were leaving offerings or warnings right at his doorstep. He described seeing luminous eyes in the darkness, but they did not match the gentle glow often glimpsed in Evelyn's fenced enclosure. Already uneasy about the missing teen, many began pointing fingers at Evelyn's wolves again. But Mr. Miller himself expressed uncertainty. "Those eyes," he confided to Officer Ryan, "they were too high off the ground and they stared like they wanted me to see them. It felt different." Complicating matters further, an unexpected corporate angle surfaced. A wealthy land developer, whose company had long eyed the forest for expansion, re-entered the scene with fresh proposals for a gated community. This developer, rumored to be behind covert surveillance in the area, used the spate of unexplained animal incidents to bolster his argument that wild predators posed a danger and needed to be removed. His slick marketing materials circulated at town meetings, painting a vision of tranquil suburban streets, replacing what he framed as hazardous backcountry. For Evelyn, the developer's push felt disturbingly targeted, as though he was using the wolves as a scapegoat to further his real estate ambitions. In quiet late-night talks with Emily and Jack, she expressed fears that vested interests might be fueling the hysteria around the missing teen to expedite deforestation and rid the region of protective wildlife laws. As conflicting narratives and new suspicions emerged, the local sense of unity frayed. longtime neighbors found themselves at odds. One group, spearheaded by families frightened for their children's safety, demanded an immediate cull of dangerous predators, wolves and any unknown beasts included. Another faction, impassioned by the glimpses of Evelyn's wolves in the local news, rallied under the banner of wildlife conservation. They argued that recent incidents stemmed from encroachment on natural habitats, not from Evelyn's well-cared-for charges. Town hall meetings devolved into shouting matches where lines were drawn, friendships tested, and solutions grew more elusive. Amid the human turmoil, Ash, Frost, and Willow continued to mature. Pack dynamics intensified in subtle yet significant ways. Ash, ever the bold leader, started behaving more aggressively if he sensed tension around the property, fur bristling at the slightest unfamiliar scent drifting from the forest edge. Frost, still cautious, began hovering protectively around Evelyn, as if he sensed she needed reassurance. Willow, caught between loyalty to her siblings and empathy for Evelyn's growing distress, displayed signs of anxiety, pacing the enclosure when conflict escalated beyond the fence line. On more than one occasion, Evelyn awoke at night to the wolves' uneasy howls, echoes of the communal unrest beyond her property's borders. Desperate to quell the spiral of suspicion and fear, Evelyn reached out to seasoned wildlife rescue organizations in neighboring counties. She inquired whether they had protocols for situations where captive raised wolves outgrew their enclosures, or if specialized sanctuaries existed that might help. Her calls were met with lukewarm responses. While a few facilities had experience rehabilitating and rehoming wild canines, they balked at the idea of accepting a bonded pack that lived so close to human habitation. The repeated rejections stoked her desperation. Time felt increasingly short, and she worried about how a single disastrous incident might prompt a lethal response from frightened townsfolk or unscrupulous officials. Meanwhile, the unknown predator, caught in blurry trail camera footage near the teenager's last known whereabouts, remained a menacing enigma. Each new snippet of evidence circulated online, fueling further speculation. In some images, the creature stood upright like a bear, while in others it appeared to slink on all fours like a large dog. A few frames showed eerie, reflective eyes glinting through the undergrowth, sending chills down the spines of even the bravest watchers. Local law enforcement, inundated with tips and half-baked theories, struggled to separate fact from hysteria. Frustration mounted when repeated attempts to track the beast yielded footprints that vanished in rocky terrain or fur samples that turned out inconclusive. Amid all these subplots, corporate exploitation, communal strife, an unidentified predator, and the pack's own internal changes, a sense of looming crisis pervaded the forest. Jackie, with his camera always ready, documented every nuance, suspecting that a singular transformative event would soon force everyone to confront the core question. Could humans and wolves genuinely coexist without conflict? Or was it inevitable that fear and misunderstanding would destroy the fragile harmony Evelyn had forged? As dusk fell each evening, painting the sky in somber hues of purple and crimson, the howls of Ash, Frost, and Willow echoed across the pines, a chorus both haunting and beautiful. Each night, Evelyn stood at the enclosure's edge, heart pounding, sensing the approach of a tipping point. The silent glances she exchanged with her wolves seemed to say, "We must prepare for whatever comes next." Yet, neither she nor the pack could have anticipated the events soon to unfold, ones that would push every relationship, every assumption, to the brink in the final bid for freedom and understanding. The uneasy quiet that settled over the town was deceptive, a fragile calm that masked the roiling tensions beneath the surface. By now, Evelyn's once simple routine of caring for Ash, Frost, and Willow had transformed into a ceaseless juggling act of public relations, legal worries, and the ever-present vigilance required to manage 3 maturing wolves. Each day began with the same determination, feeding and maintaining the pack's enclosure, ensuring their emotional and physical needs were met. Yet every moment of peace felt increasingly precious, as though borrowed from a looming conflict that could ignite at any time. In the dim hush of early morning, she would often find the wolves standing silently at the fence, gazing toward the distant pines where rumors said the mysterious predator lurked, their postures tense, yet oddly reflective. They seemed to sense the unrest that permeated the air. While she worked to reinforce the enclosure's barriers and to keep them close, she also recognized a subtle restlessness brewing in them, a longing for more freedom than her property could provide. For her part, she fought a growing dread. If even one of them slipped away to pursue some call of the wild, the town's backlash might be swift and unforgiving. Meanwhile, local officials continued to debate the future of Evelyn's pack. Some argued that relocating the wolves to a distant sanctuary was the only sane course, to prevent both risk to the community and the wolves themselves. Others contended that such a move would break the bond she had painstakingly forged, and potentially doom the wolves to a life of captivity in a sterile environment. In heated public gatherings, it was not uncommon for her to encounter pointed questions, delivered with thinly veiled hostility. Are you prepared to take full responsibility if they turn on someone? Or, how can you guarantee they won't run off and hunt our livestock? Though these confrontations were draining, she refused to shrink from them, meeting every skeptical stare with calm conviction. For all the fear and suspicion swirling around, she still had allies who believed in her, including those who had glimpsed how gentle and intelligent the wolves could be under her stewardship. Even so, beneath her stalwart front, Evelyn knew that a quiet panic gnawed at her. A single incident of violence, be it the unidentified predator attacking more livestock or the wolves escaping the enclosure, could tip the scales irreparably. Late at night, when her mind refused to rest, she reviewed old notes from the wildlife behaviorist, focusing on advice about channeling the wolves' natural instincts in healthy ways. She took them on structured walks beyond the enclosure, always mindful of potential watchers. She integrated puzzle feeders and introduced them to more complex training exercises, hoping to satisfy their mental and physical needs. Each small success, like coaxing Willow to calmly accept a new visitor's presence, was a reminder that the wolves had grown from terrified cubs to formidable but understanding companions. Yet, she remained acutely aware that their future hung on a fragile thread. At the same time, the uneasy rumor of a hidden predator, casting blame for livestock losses, lingered like a fog that refused to lift. Each new sighting triggered online firestorms. Some alleged that Evelyn's wolves were forming a savage pack with this unknown creature, while others advanced wilder theories of a clandestine experiment to breed super predators in the forest's shadowy recesses. Law enforcement, overwhelmed by conflicting reports and pressured by panicked residents, found it difficult to maintain rational discourse. Their official statements, carefully worded to avoid sparking hysteria, admitted only that an unidentified animal may be responsible for recent livestock incidents, while urging people to stay calm. Yet calm was the last thing on anyone's mind. Fear escalated with each passing day, threatening to undermine every ounce of goodwill the wolves had earned. Caught in this maelstrom, Emily, who had once simply admired Evelyn's devotion, stepped up her own role. She launched a social media campaign aimed at dispelling myths, sharing heartwarming anecdotes of time spent with the wolves. She posted short videos of the pack nuzzling Evelyn or playing gently with puzzle toys. Those glimpses of peaceful coexistence occasionally moved hesitant onlookers, but in a climate of anxiety and partial truths, skepticism thrived. Still, Emily refused to relent, organizing small community meet and greets to humanize the wolves, with restricted attendance and tight safety measures. "People fear what they don't understand," she often remarked. "But if they can see how these animals genuinely trust Evelyn, maybe they'll consider the possibility that they aren't the monsters rumored about." While these grassroots efforts worked to shift the tide of public opinion, the roiling undercurrent of dread remained. Pro-wolf supporters clashed with hardliners at town halls, culminating in heated arguments that threatened to spiral out of control. In more subdued corners of the internet, however, a more chilling narrative had begun to form. References to armed vigilantes or self-appointed protectors who might take it upon themselves to eliminate perceived threats. Though no direct threats were made to Evelyn or her wolves, each whisper of such extremism weighed on her soul. Every glance at Ash, tall, muscular, and proud, reminded her how quickly an act of misunderstood wildness could be misconstrued as aggression. Amid these tensions, Jack's camera continued to capture fleeting moments of genuine affection between Evelyn and her pack. A quiet evening spent watching Frost rest his head on her lap, Willow bringing her a toy unprompted, or the unwavering devotion in Ash's eyes whenever she spoke, images that told a story of a bond that transcended fear. While the rest of the world seemed divided between awe and alarm, Jack's footage suggested a third option, that a careful, loving middle ground might exist, albeit one fraught with challenge and misunderstanding. All the while, a shadow loomed over them all in the form of the unknown predator, still prowling the edges of farmland. Unresolved livestock losses and cryptic footprints continued to drive the frenzy of speculation, threatening to cast the final, damning shadow on the wolves if any incident were to coincide with signs of their roaming. A silent countdown seemed to tick away in the community's collective mind, the moment when proof, good or bad, would reveal itself and decide once and for all whether the wolves could remain, or whether fear and condemnation would finally extinguish the delicate bond Evelyn had nurtured so painstakingly. The bitter taste of uncertainty hung over the town like a winter fog, seeping into every conversation and coloring every decision. While Evelyn stood firm in her commitment to protect Ash, Frost and Willow, the promise of a final clash between fear and understanding grew too strong to ignore. Recent sightings of the unknown predator, tall, dark and menacing, fanned the flames of speculation. Tensions reached a boil as some residents whispered anxiously of vigilantes forming under the cover of night, determined to settle the wolf problem themselves. To them, it no longer mattered whether Evelyn's pack was innocent. They saw only the threat of fang and claw. Compounding the pressure, the local authorities began to cave under the relentless demands of worried farmers and restless citizens. It wasn't a formal crackdown, but a sense of creeping inevitability that made each knock on Evelyn's door a potential turning point. One evening, Officer Ryan arrived with a polite but solemn expression. He explained that while no direct evidence implicated her wolves in livestock disappearances or in the missing teens case, the climate of fear had grown too volatile to ignore. "Your pack might not be guilty," he said, choosing his words with care, "but the danger therein has never been higher. We can't guarantee their safety, or yours, if someone decides to take matters into their own hands." That admission stung Evelyn like a cold slap of reality. For the first time, she seriously contemplated a course of action she'd dreaded, relocating the wolves to a specialized sanctuary. She'd already pursued initial inquiries. Most sanctuaries were overcrowded, wary of a bonded pack that had lived so closely with humans. Yet perhaps it was better than the mounting peril of an angry neighbor with a rifle. Each day seemed to bring new rumors of brazen nighttime shooters patrolling the outskirts of her property, searching for any sign of the threat. Emily, seeing how the weight pressed down on her friend, organized a last-ditch series of open-house events to quell the community's unease. She wanted to show what life with the wolves was truly like: the structured training, the daily lessons in discipline, the enrichment activities that kept them engaged and prevented aimless hunting. On a crisp Saturday morning, a small crowd gathered, composed of cautious townspeople, a few curious supporters, and local reporters. In the enclosed yard, Ash, Frost, and Willow performed some simple commands: sit, wait, come, responding to Evelyn's confident signals. Their wild majesty was on full display, yet it was laced with a calm that challenged the idea of them as mindless killers. For a brief moment, hope flickered in the attendees' eyes. That hope, however, was short-lived. Amid the mild applause, rumors erupted online of yet another nighttime attack on livestock near the forest's edge, complete with shaky phone footage of a hulking shape slinking through the darkness. The timing and location set alarm bells ringing. Close enough to Evelyn's property to implicate her pack, but distant enough to remain ambiguous. She could feel the renewed glare of suspicion at the open house event. As murmurs of "probably those wolves again" passed between the guests, tension thickened like storm clouds overhead. Matters grew direr when a small group of heavily armed men showed up after the demonstration, not with warm interest, but with cold, accusatory stares. They made no direct threats, yet their presence spoke volumes. "We'll see you around," one of them muttered before leaving, his hand lingering on the butt of a hunting rifle. Every nerve in Evelyn's body told her that the precipice she'd feared was now directly beneath her feet. Caught between the swelling hostility outside and the wolves' growing restlessness within, she wrestled with excruciating decisions. Could she bear to uproot Ash, Frost, and Willow from the only home they'd known, sending them off to an uncertain future in a far-flung sanctuary? And if she waited, banking on the chance that reason and evidence would prevail, was she risking a worse outcome? One involving vigilantes or frightened locals taking preemptive measures? Jack, capturing every heartbeat of the turmoil, sensed the story drawing closer to its flashpoint. In hushed discussions with Emily and the wildlife behaviorist, he weighed the possibility that the unknown predator might reappear in a way that provided indisputable proof of the wolves' innocence, or, in the worst case, an incident that would seal their fate. His camera never left his side. He filmed day and night, hoping either for a fortuitous cameo by the real culprit or a final testament if tragedy struck. Meanwhile, as if adding to the tension, Frost exhibited new signs of agitation. He prowled the enclosure perimeter, glaring into the forest with bristled fur, as though sensing a presence just beyond the threshold. Late at night, the pack's howls took on a sharp, urgent tone that no longer sounded simply like a call to the wild. It bordered on a warning, as if they were trying to keep something ominous at bay. Their combined vigilance made Evelyn wonder if the unknown predator lurked closer than anyone suspected, fueling her conviction that her wolves weren't the threat people imagined, but perhaps guardians forewarning of a real menace. As the final vestiges of daylight dissolved into an uneasy twilight, a conclusion seemed inevitable. The confrontation between the wolves' precarious existence and the town's rampant fear would soon reach its breaking point. The next move could come from anyone: a vengeful neighbor, a misunderstanding official, or the dark creature lurking in the woods. All Evelyn knew for certain was that the clock was ticking, and every choice she made from here on out would determine whether Ash, Frost, and Willow had a future in the only home they'd ever known, or whether this extraordinary chapter of coexistence would end in heartbreak, confirming the critics who had once called her crazy. The uneasy calm in the town felt more like an omen than a respite, as if everyone were holding their breath for the next spark to ignite a powder keg of fear and frustration. Despite the ominous tension, Evelyn tried to maintain her daily routine with Ash and Frost and Willow, clinging to any semblance of normalcy. Each morning, she did her rounds, checking the enclosure's fencing for new signs of tampering, scanning for footprints or odd disturbances, and verifying that her pack was secure. The wolves sensed her cautious anxiety, often pressing their noses through the wire mesh to watch her quietly with large, questioning eyes. Their stoic acceptance of the precarious situation only deepened Evelyn's determination to keep them safe. Emily and her family, unwavering in their support, ramped up their community outreach. They invited small groups from the town to observe the wolves' feeding routines and the pack's interactions with Evelyn, hoping to quell the relentless unease. In these carefully supervised sessions, Ash displayed his commanding presence without aggression, while Frost hovered nearby, calmer in the presence of strangers, yet ever alert, and Willow, shy as always, needed coaxing to edge forward. Most visitors came away startled by how controlled the environment seemed, how the once maligned predators responded to a gentle, guiding hand. Yet rumors and prejudice proved stubborn foes. For every onlooker disarmed by the wolves' docile cooperation, another left muttering that it was only a matter of time before primal instincts asserted themselves. Meanwhile, Officer Ryan's investigation into the unknown predator reached a standstill. Despite sightings reported all over the outskirts, not a single conclusive piece of evidence emerged to identify the creature. A few trail camera captures offered tantalizing glimpses of a large, shadowy figure crossing moonlit clearings, but none provided enough detail to confirm species or motive. It was as though the beast deliberately avoided leaving a clear track, fueling speculation about its intelligence or cunning. Even so, the livestock losses continued, sporadic but unrelenting, escalating the town's anxiety. The abiding question, what hunts in the night if not Evelyn's wolves, hovered over every broken fence and missing hen. Within her pack, Evelyn noticed subtle shifts that reflected the growing tension. As she scanning the property line more often, would bristle at the slightest unfamiliar sound. Frost watched Evelyn's every move, as if trying to sense her mood before reacting himself, and Willow's gentle dependency sharpened into a near-constant need for closeness. She would paw at the enclosure gate whenever Evelyn neared, as if fearful of any separation. The adrenaline coursing through each day seemed to seep into the wolves too, forging an even tighter bond while stoking their collective stress. To address this, Evelyn tried introducing more enrichment activities, complex puzzle feeders, elaborate hide-and-seek games with new scents, but the watchful tension in their eyes persisted. Behind closed doors, she wrestled with the possibility of relocating them to a sanctuary. Late at night, she would pace her small living room, torn between the vow she made to the wolves when they were helpless pups and the mounting reality that the community might never accept them. She pored over leaflets from faraway facilities that specialized in large canines, reading the fine print about space, socialization, and public visitation. Each option felt like surrender. Could she truly separate from the creatures she had nurtured since infancy? And would placing them in a strange environment, possibly behind more imposing fences and limited human contact, really honor the bond they had formed? As her doubts grew, corporate interests added a fresh layer of complication. The land developer, whose ambition was to reshape the forest into a lucrative suburban sprawl, seized on every livestock incident and every uncertain rumor about the unknown predator to push for protective measures. His glossy brochures argued that a controlled cull of wild canines, Evelyn's included, would open the door to modern Taos profitable development. Quiet murmurs from local government hinted that powerful business backers might already be influencing policy decisions. The pressure weighed heavily on the mayor's office, which faced the dual outcry of terrified residents and eager investors. Each day, the developers' public statements grew bolder, painting a dire picture of a wild territory overrun by shadowy beasts, a perfect justification for bulldozing the land. In an unexpected twist, Officer Ryan uncovered a perplexing link between the developers' operations and the missing teen's last known whereabouts. Construction blueprints filed years before suggested expansions into areas once considered too remote for easy building. Some rudimentary roads had been cleared without public knowledge, a direct violation of environmental regulations. The tracks near these hidden routes bore faint resemblances to those found around vanished farm animals, markings of heavy machinery layered over unexplained paw prints. While nothing definitive connected these clues, the puzzle grew more ominous. If the developers' covert actions had stirred up a displaced or hybridized predator, it might explain the sporadic livestock raids and feed townspeople's desperation to blame Evelyn's wolves. At the same time, Emily's online campaign drew unexpected allies. Wildlife advocates from neighboring regions began sharing her posts, highlighting Evelyn's wolves as an emblem of how humans and apex predators might coexist under careful stewardship. Stories poured in from far-flung places, accounts of rescued foxes, tamed bobcats, or even cougars that lived in specialized sanctuaries. Each anecdote hinting that the line between wild and domesticated was not as absolute as many believed. The growing wave of digital support emboldened a small but vocal faction within the town. People who saw the wolves not as a threat, but as living testaments to empathy triumphing over fear. They formed a grassroots coalition, pressuring local government to halt any rash actions until the real predator was identified, and to investigate the developers' clandestine expansions before letting the forest be irrevocably changed. Yet for all the encouragement, it was clear that an event of irrefutable magnitude would be needed to break the stalemate. The tension building around the wolves and the ghostly predator remained taut as a wire. One wrong note, and the entire symphony could collapse into chaos. At her cabin, Evelyn went through the motions of feeding and training with grim determination, never letting her guard down. Any evening stroll outside the enclosure was accompanied by nervous glances over her shoulder, scanning for flickers of eyes in the darkness. The wolves, sensing her heightened alertness, mirrored her caution. Ash's low growl at night, unprovoked and haunted, suggested he too felt a presence lurking just outside the circle of lamplight. In that charged atmosphere, each day of calm became a perverse countdown to a cataclysm that felt inevitable. The unknown predator could strike again, The developer could push for immediate extermination of local wolves, or a frightened neighbor might open fire at the slightest provocation. As the forest breathed its ancient hush, it seemed poised on the brink of a revelation, one that would either validate Evelyn's unwavering trust in ash, frost, and willow, or confirm the darkest fears that haunted every corner of the community's imagination. The uneasy truce between Evelyn's wolves and the community wavered, day by day on the precipice of a crisis. Tensions soared as fresh livestock losses were reported, each new incident stoking the fire of public outcry. No solid evidence implicated ash, frost, or willow, yet the unknown predator remained elusive, leaving a dark cloud of suspicion hovering over the pack. More than once, Evelyn awoke to the sound of distant gunshots cracking the midnight silence. Though no harm had yet befallen her wolves, the message was grimly clear. Fear was morphing into desperation, and desperation could lead to deadly mistakes. The most unsettling development came from a series of trail cam recordings shared by exasperated farmers living at the forest's edge. Low-resolution clips showed a hulking form gliding through the moonlit woods with unnatural stealth, its eyes reflecting an eerie glare in the darkness. Each new clip sparked a frenzy of digital speculation. Some insisted it was merely a large stray dog. Others swore it was a rogue bear or a long-lost breed of hybrid wolf dog created through clandestine means. Yet no one could say with certainty, and that vacuum of clarity became a breeding ground for fear. Hashtags like mystery predator and wolves at war plastered local feeds, morphing the debate into a polarizing spectacle where half the town demanded immediate protective measures and the other half pleaded for calm. Officer Ryan, frazzled by the mounting pressure, found himself in the crosshairs of both the conservation-minded camp and the faction calling for a cull. Though he had once doubted Evelyn's project, he had come to respect her diligence and empathize with her predicament. Late at night, he'd call Evelyn to discuss any new leads, footprints found near farmland, splatters of fur snagged on broken fences. Most led nowhere, leaving the critical question unanswered. If not Evelyn's wolves, then what exactly was menacing the outskirts? In the midst of this turmoil, a turning point arrived when a local teen, an outspoken critic of Evelyn, staged a live-streamed challenge to search for the wolves in the forest. Fueled by bravado and social media clout, he slipped past the cabin's perimeter at dusk, determined to prove that the pack was roaming free and endangering people's lives. Yet instead of capturing footage of ash, frost, or willow, his live video feed abruptly ended with a jolt of terror. Distant watchers saw the flicker of a dark, towering figure before the camera dropped, leaving viewers staring at the ground and hearing only panicked breathing. Within minutes, the feed cut off. A jarring hush fell over the online thread, an ominous moment that ignited the town's deepest anxieties. Spurred into action, search parties fanned out across the pine-laden trails, their flashlights and dog teams combing every grove for a sign of the missing teen. Police lines crackled with fragmented reports, bizarre tracks discovered, tree trunks scored by deep claw marks, and pools of disturbed soil that suggested a scuffle. The forest at night echoed with the calls of worried parents and the howls of distant animals. Eventually, the teen was found disoriented but alive, perched atop a low branch of a birch, trembling and clutching his phone. He babbled about a hulking silhouette that chased him, describing it as way bigger than any wolf, with eyes that gleamed green in the moonlight. Though exhausted, he was unharmed, yet the fear in his eyes stoked the town's paranoia further. Confronted with this near disaster, local authorities convened an emergency meeting at the town hall. Attendance spilled out into the corridors and the lawn outside, where anxious citizens and restless media clamored for answers. On stage, a panel of officials, including Officer Ryan and a reluctant mayor, faced a crowd whose emotions ran high. Some demanded the wolves be relocated or killed outright. Others implored the town to focus on unmasking the true unknown predator. Evelyn, seated in the front row, felt each accusatory stare like a bruise. Surrounded by a swirl of harsh voices, she clung to the silent reassurance that ash, frost, and willow had remained secure in their enclosure, evidenced by time-stamped footage she had meticulously collected. Yet she was acutely aware that facts alone might not be enough in a climate of escalating fear. As tension peaked, the meeting took an unexpected turn. A flustered researcher from a neighboring county arrived halfway through, breathless and pale. He brandished grainy infrared footage taken near a forbidden patch of forest where illegal logging had reportedly occurred. Though dimly lit, the video clearly showed a massive creature loping on all fours, its coat dark and matted, standing taller than any known wolf. Its gait was unnatural, its ears pointed oddly, and the shape of its muzzle strangely elongated. The image froze on the screen, capturing the creature mid-stride. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the researcher declared he had reasons to believe this might be a long-rumored black beast, possibly an illegal hybrid, or even an ex-lab experiment gone feral. Pandemonium erupted. Some interpreted the revelation as a final indictment of Evelyn's wolves, an ominous sign that an entire rogue population might be breeding under cover of night. Others saw it as absolute vindication, proof there was a far more lethal suspect prowling the dark, exonerating Ash, Frost, and Willow from every suspicion. Shouts and pleas overlapped, swirling into a cacophony of demands. To tighten forest surveillance, to implement shoot-on-sight policies, or to mobilize rescue squads to track the beast. The mayor repeatedly pounded his gavel, his face pale with stress as he tried to restore order in vain. Through the chaos, Evelyn felt a surge of both relief and dread. The wolves she had raised with such care had never been the threat, and now the evidence was public. Yet, if this monstrous creature was indeed terrorizing the outskirts, it could push an already terrified populace to take extreme measures, even lethal ones that might claim her wolves by mistake. As the meeting dissolved in uproar, she exchanged a grim look with Emily and Jack, understanding without words that the time for half measures had ended. The question was no longer whether her wolves were safe, but how and if peace could be restored, before fear consumed every spark of reason and compassion. Behind the rabble of the crowd and the flickering image of the beast on the projector screen, the forest seemed to brood in silence, awaiting the next move in a standoff where both innocence and monstrous shadows coexisted. The stage was set for a final confrontation, one in which the unknown predator, the frantic townspeople, and Evelyn's resolute bond with her wolves would collide, deciding once and for all whether wildness and humanity could share the same realm without devouring one another. Nightfall brought a restless hush that settled over the outskirts of town. In a clearing just beyond Evelyn's property, a handful of anxious residents had gathered, some with rifles slung over their shoulders, others clutching flashlights as though they were lifelines. The heated town hall meeting earlier that day had ended with an uproar, leaving the community in a fevered state of both fear and fury. The revelation of a hulking, mysterious predator roaming the forest only served to intensify the clamor for immediate action. No one wanted to wait for another vanishing or another livestock attack. The call had gone out, protect our own, whatever the cost. Evelyn stood in her cabin's doorway, heart hammering at the low growl that rumbled from Ash. The wolf's stance was rigid, hackles raised, ears pinned forward to catch the faint sounds drifting from the woods. Frost and Willow paced behind him, mirroring his tension. The distant beams of flashlights danced against the pine trunks, accompanied by the sharp crackle of walkie-talkies. She felt a chill run through her, not from the cool night air, but from the realization that a vigilante hunt was unfolding beyond her fence. If the men out there encountered any large canine in the dark, they might not wait to identify it. Unease had been building all day, ever since the researchers' footage showing that unnaturally large figure prowling near the illegal logging sites. Some saw the video as proof that Evelyn's wolves were innocent, but others believed it confirmed their worst fears about an entire population of monstrous beasts. Caught in the storm were Ash, Frost, and Willow, singled out as scapegoats in a drama they never asked to be part of. Evelyn cursed the timing as she rushed to secure her wolves in their enclosure, verifying that every gate and latch was locked. She checked the cameras she'd installed, half hoping she might capture evidence that could prevent tragedy, a fleeting glimpse of something bigger, darker, and far more dangerous than her pack. Meanwhile, the search parties fanned out. A group led by a stern-faced farmer threaded the narrow deer trails, eyes darting with suspicion at each rustle in the brush. Another cluster, including a brash local known for his loud threats against the wolves, scoured an old fire road. Occasionally, a shot rang out, echoing through the pines, yet no triumphant cry followed. At her cabin, Evelyn winced at every distant gunshot, imagining the heartbreak if one of those bullets found its way to Ash, Frost, or Willow. She clenched her fists against the frustration of being unable to protect them beyond the barriers of her yard. In the dimness just beyond her property line, Jack set up a small observation point. While not armed, he carried his camera, hoping to capture the elusive creature if it appeared, and document evidence that might exonerate Evelyn's wolves. Even a fleeting video clip could turn public sentiment around, forcing the town to direct its alarms away from her pack. His breath plumed in the chilly air as he listened to branches snapping under the weight of unseen presences in the dark. Through his lens, the bobbing lights of searchers appeared like fireflies, their frantic movements a testament to both their fear and their earnest desire for a resolution. In the forest's hush, every sound magnified. A twig cracked, and Ash's snarl pierced the silence, sending Frost and Willow into tense, low stances. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Could it be the unknown predator drawing near, emboldened by the commotion, or a foolish hunter drawn to their enclosure by the wolves' silhouettes? Carefully, she stepped outside carrying a flashlight in one hand and a firm voice in her chest. "Ash, stay," she commanded, her tone a mixture of authority and pleading. The wolf obeyed with a hesitant rumble, though tension still rippled through him. Suddenly, from deep within the blackness of the pines, a startled shout arose, followed by a chorus of urgent radio chatter. Evelyn strained to decipher the words. Something about movement, a large figure, a vantage point lost. Then came a single, panicked gunshot, cutting through the night. Her blood ran cold. If that bullet struck one of her wolves, she might not find out until morning, if at all. A moment later, another shot rang out, followed by a series of curses and heavy crashing through undergrowth. Then silence. The hush that felt more dangerous than any roar, a vacuum where the next sound might be heartbreak. Jack Trong, crouched beside a mossy log, managed to keep his camera rolling. His lens, scanning in the murk, captured only flickers of movement, a shape slinking between the firs, easily 8 or 9 feet in length if the scale was to be believed. By the faint moonlight, it appeared lean and long-legged, its coat seemingly black as coal, eyes reflecting a fierce green glow. As quickly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving in its wake the echo of ragged breathing on the path behind it. Scrambling over fallen branches, a shaken young searcher stumbled into Jack's view, muttering incoherently about eyes shining in the dark. No mention of Evelyn's wolves, only dread at whatever had crossed his path. Back at the enclosure, Evelyn pressed her palms against the wire fencing, feeling the wolves pressing back with gentle nuzzles. The gunshots had rattled them as much as it had unsettled her. She spoke in low, calming tones, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. This was the moment she had feared for so long, a direct confrontation between the frightened townspeople and a forest mystery. The stage was set for any misstep to become fatal. If the night ended without a body, human, wolf, or otherwise, it would be a small miracle. Yet, she sensed something shifting in the narrative. The fact that shots had been fired, yet no triumphant claim of a slain wolf or monstrous beast followed, hinted that the unknown predator was a cunning adversary, neither easily cornered nor the type to linger where bullets flew. Confusion hung in the cold air as search parties reconvened, their harried faces illuminated by the glow of flashlights in the returning gloom. They had found no trace of Evelyn's wolves, no evidence that the missing livestock or threatened teen were the pack's doing, only an unsettling impression of something large and elusive stalking the same trails as humans. Tension spiked further, poised like a fragile glass sculpture. One slip, a single tragic shot from a trembling hand, could end Ash and Frost or Willow before any truth was discovered. But if a fleeting moment of clarity emerged, if the camera captured the real culprit, or if a witness came forward with definitive proof, the wolves might be spared the weight of unfounded blame. The forest, caught between fear and fact, roiled with invisible currents of possibility as the final act of this unfolding drama loomed. As dawn edged closer, painting the sky in faint shades of grey and purple, the tension clinging to the forest did not abate. If anything, the uneasy truce between the anxious townspeople and Evelyn's wolves felt shakier than ever. Gunshots from the previous night's search still reverberated in memory, fueling an undercurrent of dread. Crowded around makeshift fire pits near the forest's entrance, some of the more determined townsfolk lingered with rifles or restless expressions. They exchanged uneasy glances, uncertain whether the danger they hunted was real or if their own fear had conjured a phantom of snarling shadows. Evelyn, however, had not slept. She spent the long hours before dawn patrolling her fenced enclosure, ensuring once more that Ash, Frost, and Willow were safe inside. The wolves, too, remained on edge, pacing under the dim light. Each step of their large paws sounded unnaturally loud in the hush, and their keen eyes watched Evelyn as though seeking reassurance. While the unknown predator had evidently chosen not to clash with her pack or the search parties, the risk of a tragic mistake, someone shooting at movement in the dark, remained. She breathed a quiet prayer for daylight, hoping it might cool tempers before another round of misguided vengeance took shape. Shortly after sunrise, Officer Ryan arrived with a grim look that told Evelyn all she needed to know. Calm was in short supply, and the simmering conflict had not been resolved by the night's fruitless hunt. Gathering Evelyn, Emily, and a handful of the town's more moderate voices, he shared the scant details gleaned from the chaotic search. Several armed men had caught a glimpse of something undeniably large skulking near the logging trails, but the creature melted away into the trees. No one had fired a fatal shot, but plenty had tried. Their frustration and fear would only intensify if another night passed without clarity. While they spoke, Jack appeared at the cabin's door, dark circles under his eyes and camera still in hand. He had spent the last hours reviewing footage recorded in the gloom, searching for a single definitive frame that might exonerate Evelyn's wolves. Sighing, he admitted that the images captured only half-seen silhouettes and darting movements, none crisp enough to serve as inarguable evidence. "I can't prove the wolves are innocent if I can't show what's really out there," he muttered. The frustration in his voice mirrored the claustrophobic tension enwrapping the town, a tension that demanded resolution yet refused to yield a straightforward solution. Throughout the morning, the phrase "it's only a matter of time" circulated like an ominous mantra, a matter of time before the unknown predator struck again, or a matter of time before a jittery vigilante mistook Evelyn's wolves for the monster in the trees. In an attempt to defuse the crisis, community leaders called an emergency town hall meeting for that afternoon, hoping to channel the mounting fear into constructive dialogue. As the midday sun rose higher, adrenaline and dread pushed the entire town into a state of heightened alert. Mothers kept their children indoors, storekeepers locked doors early, and even the daily hum of routine felt overshadowed by an unspoken sense of impending confrontation. Against this backdrop, Evelyn made a quiet, wrenching decision. She couldn't risk an innocent wolf dying because of misplaced suspicion. The prior rumors of suitable sanctuaries had led nowhere, but she decided it was time to contact larger, specialized facilities far outside the region, places with the resources to handle 3 bonded adult wolves and to maintain them responsibly. She dialed each number with trembling fingers, leaving messages, sending photos, carefully explaining the pack's background and the precarious climate in her hometown. Each call tugged at her heartstrings, the notion of surrendering Ash, Frost, and Willow nearly suffocating her with guilt. But if it meant saving their lives from a cornered, fearful populace, she had to be prepared to sacrifice her own bond. Unbeknownst to her, a new player entered the scene that afternoon, a well-connected wildlife researcher from a distant university, drawn by the swirling rumors of a monstrous hybrid. Arriving with advanced equipment and a calm demeanor, she spent the hours before the town hall meeting, analyzing droppings, footprints, and the partial recordings Jack had provided. Her initial conclusion was sobering. Whatever haunted the forest was larger than any normal wolf and displayed unusual stealth. Yet, she found no overlap in territory or signs linking Evelyn's pack to the recent livestock kills. That discovery, though promising, remained too circumstantial to quell the fury of the town's more aggressive voices, people who yearned for a tangible target to blame. The fateful meeting convened in the cramped auditorium. A hush settled over the crowd as Officer Ryan stepped onto the stage, flanked by the wildlife researcher and a few community leaders. Tension seemed to gather in the corners of the room, like shadows waiting for a spark to erupt. As the researcher explained her preliminary findings, emphasizing that the mysterious creature was a distinct threat unrelated to Evelyn's wolves, many spectators listened with guarded curiosity. But others glowered skeptically, arms folded tight, determined not to let go of their righteous anger. When Evelyn stood to speak, her wolves' presence was felt as tangibly as if they stood by her side. She spoke of Ash, Frost, and Willow in trembling, earnest tones, how they had grown from orphaned cubs into strong, loyal companions. Her eyes glistened with the ache of possibly losing them. Yet, she didn't plead for special treatment, only for rational thinking. The entire hall fell silent, unsettled by her quivering voice. Even so, a handful of impatient mutters rose from the crowd, stoking a swirl of dread that threatened to overpower empathy. The real turning point came when a local orchard owner, a silent bystander until then, hesitantly rose to share the story of a late-night encounter she'd had 2 nights before. She had glimpsed a massive, black-furred figure prowling near her property, far too large to be Evelyn's subadult wolves. The creature's luminous eyes and daunting silhouette had chilled her to the bone. "It felt nothing like the wolves I saw at her place," she confessed, her voice unsteady. A murmur coursed through the crowd. For some, it was the first concrete testimony supporting the existence of a very different menace. The orchard owner's words, though simple, cracked open a space for doubt to challenge the prejudice directed at Evelyn's pack. With the temperature of the debate shifting, the meeting teetered on a crucial edge. Either it would lead to a constructive plan to capture or chase away the unidentified beast, sparing Ash, Frost, and Willow from undue blame, or the hostility could still explode into a final, irrevocable act of violence. In that final hush, Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes. She realized that their fate now rested in the hands of her neighbor's ability to see beyond fear. The stage was set for a decision that would echo far beyond the boundaries of this small town, determining not just the wolves' future, but also whether a fragile dream of coexistence could endure amid the primal tension between humanity and the wild. The final confrontation arrived on a moonless, windless night when the forest fell into an almost suffocating stillness, as though holding its breath. By this time, 5 years had passed since Evelyn had first taken in the 3 orphaned wolf cubs, Ash, Frost, and Willow, and the little ones had grown into majestic adults who commanded both awe and trepidation. Having survived near tragedies and endless suspicion, the pack had thrived under Evelyn's unwavering devotion, yet the simmering hostility from certain townspeople had never truly faded. Now all the unaddressed fears and half-buried tensions converged in a single moment that would test not only the wolves' innocence, but also the possibility of coexistence between human and wild. That evening, a series of frantic calls went out. Something was attacking livestock again, but this time dangerously close to the outskirts of town. Multiple sightings indicated a large, dark-furred creature, far bigger than any typical wolf. Rumors spread that a boy walking home along the forest's edge had stumbled upon the scene, only to flee in terror when the beast let loose a guttural snarl. As the boy sprinted back, a local search party quickly mobilized. Hunters readied rifles and flashlights, mothers locked their doors, and a hush swept through the community as if everyone braced for the worst. Amid the chaos, the old accusations resurfaced. What if these are Evelyn's wolves, finally reverting to savage instincts? But others insisted the pack was locked away at her property. There had to be another culprit. Evelyn felt the night's tension in her bones. She rushed to verify that Ash, Frost, and Willow were indeed safe within their enclosure. Heart pounding, she found them pacing, their golden eyes fixed on the dark line of trees beyond the fence. On nights like this, they always seemed to sense trouble before it manifested. Reassured they were still secured, she decided to venture out, hoping to assist in identifying the real threat. She had time-stamped camera footage and logs that could prove her wolves' innocence if necessary, but she feared an armed crowd running on adrenaline might not wait for evidence. Gathering her flashlight, phone, and every ounce of courage, she slipped away into the night. A mile from her cabin, near a clearing overshadowed by a stand of pines, she spotted the search party. A loose circle of figures with flashlights cutting through the gloom, rifles clutched in anxious hands. Joining them, she scanned the ground for footprints or any sign of a struggle. The only sound was the hushed tension in each ragged breath. Then, without warning, a frantic bleat broke the silence. Somewhere among the shadows, another sheep was under attack. Lights swiveled in that direction, and the group sprinted forward. Rounding a bend in the trail, they arrived at a small clearing, illuminated by flickering beams that revealed a heart-stopping sight. A massive silhouette loomed over a fallen ewe, its muzzle dark with fresh blood, eyes shining a feral green in the artificial glare. It was larger than even the most alarmist theories had described, a monstrous figure easily dwarfing Evelyn's grown wolves. Muscles rippled beneath a coat of dense, black fur. For a split second, it glared at the intruders. A ragged hush fell. No one dared move. Then chaos erupted. Someone fired a panicked shot that grazed a tree trunk, and the monstrous beast roared in defiance, bounding into the deeper thicket. The searchers rushed after it, hearts pounding with a mix of terror and triumph at having finally cornered their elusive villain. But the undergrowth swallowed them. In seconds, the clearing was empty, but for the dead sheep and the scattered hush of those left behind. Evelyn's heart thundered. She had never seen anything like this creature. The scale of its shoulders, the savage gleam in its eyes, the way it moved, predatory, cunning, exposed a raw, dangerous presence. If these men cornered it, a deadly confrontation was all but inevitable. Gritting her teeth, she remembered her locked enclosure. She could only pray that no one would turn confusion into revenge by shooting Ashway, Frost, or Willow on the assumption that a wolf is a wolf. Spurred by dread and a last spark of determination, she took off after the search party, ignoring the pleas of a few stragglers who warned her to stay back. The forest swallowed her up in a tapestry of shadows and half-seen shapes. Over the pounding of her pulse, she heard distant shouts, the crack of underbrush, the echo of another rifle discharge. The second shot was answered by a frenzied roar, followed by a cacophony of yells that made her blood run cold. Quickening her pace, she tore through a swath of prickly branches, ignoring the stinging scratches on her arms, until she burst into a hollow where flickering flashlights revealed a scene of near panic. The monstrous creature had circled behind the search party, cutting off their escape route. A face-off ensued. Two men, trembling and wide-eyed, pointed rifles at the beast, who paced back and forth like a cornered demon, bearing enormous fangs in a silent threat. Evelyn lurched forward, about to shout a warning, when a rustle nearby made her spin. A figure stood at her side. Jack, breathing hard, camera in hand, capturing every moment. His eyes were alive with terror. "We need to pull them out of there," he gasped, staring at the lethal tableau. She nodded, swallowing a wave of nausea. This wasn't some easy blame game. They were face to face with a monstrous threat none of them had truly prepared for. All at once, a savage bark erupted. The beast lunged in feigned aggression, prompting one of the men to fire. The bullet missed wide, striking a tree trunk. In that delirious second, it became clear that fear had brought them all to the brink of tragedy. Could reason or compassion still exist here, where primal terror ruled? Suddenly, a flurry of movement from behind Evelyn made them all freeze. Three lean shapes bounded into the clearing. Ash, Frost, and Willow emerged from the darkness, having broken free or been let loose in a last-ditch effort to help. The crowd gasped, guns swinging uncertainly between the monstrous predator and the newly arrived wolves. Evelyn's voice caught in her throat, powerless to call them off. But the wolves, ignoring both the men and the rifles, faced the monstrous intruder with raised hackles and low, resonant growls, a challenge from one apex predator to another. In that electrified standoff, on the cusp of destruction, the final lines between condemnation and salvation blurred. The question of whether the pack could prove its innocence or even survive this confrontation pressed on every trembling breath. For one fleeting heartbeat, the entire forest hushed, forging a singular, unforgettable instant, predator versus predator, fear against hope, as the mother of all showdowns hung in the balance. When the three wolves, Ash, Frost, and Willow, emerged from the darkness, the forest seemed to tighten its grip on every breath and heartbeat. Their sudden appearance in the clearing, where a monstrous predator faced off against armed townspeople, was as startling as the earlier decision Evelyn had made to adopt them. Under the faint glow of flashlights and the trembling aim of rifles, a moment of raw suspension took hold. Every person there, Evelyn included, felt the magnitude of what was about to happen. A final verdict on whether human fear or a wild bond would determine the outcome. Ash, the largest and most commanding of the pack, advanced a single step, lowering his head and baring his teeth in a steady growl. Frost and Willow flanked him, their eyes locked on the hulking creature that had terrorized the outskirts, as if collectively deciding they would stand as a pack against this unknown threat. The monstrous predator, its fur dark and matted, its shape imposing beyond typical canines, wavered for the briefest instant, caught off guard by the wolves' arrival. It lifted its head, meeting Ash's gaze in a clash of raw, primal challenge. In that tense second, everything else faded. The armed men, the swirling rumors of the missing livestock, the panic that had crescendoed over months. The pack's loyalty to Evelyn and to each other crystallized in a united front, ready to protect the territory they recognized as their own. Even the men who had braced themselves for a shootout stood transfixed, uncertain whether to redirect their aim at Ash's pack or the monstrous predator. Confusion and reluctant awe crossed their features. After all this time blaming Evelyn's wolves, they now found themselves unexpectedly shielded by them. Evelyn, breath shuddering in her lungs, edged closer, voice barely audible as she called softly to her wolves, urging them not to engage in a deadly fight. Though she offered no specific commands, her presence anchored the pack. She could see the tension in Ash's muscles, the strain in Frost's stance, and the tremor in Willow's eyes, each of them torn between their ingrained caution around humans and the instinctive desire to guard their domain. Yet it was their collective bond with her, the human who had nursed them back from orphaned cubs to formidable adults, that seemed to hold them steady, preventing a reckless charge that could end in tragedy. The monstrous creature, for its part, snarled a final warning, blood still fresh on its muzzle from the sheep it had claimed earlier. Its piercing eyes flickered among the armed men, the petrified watchers, and the intruding wolves that now threatened its prize. Then, with a guttural huff, it turned and bounded off into the deeper woods. A flurry of curses and startled cries came from the townspeople, but not a single shot followed. It was as though in that pivotal moment, the entire gathering had understood that firing blindly into the night could seal more than one unfortunate fate. In the stunned silence that followed, Ash let out a low growl of lingering defiance. Slowly, the wolves turned to face the onlookers. The men, rifles half lowered, stared back with a mixture of relief and residual fear. Blood pounded in every ear. Once so quick to blame these very wolves, many found themselves grappling with profound disquiet at having been protected by them. Even more jarring was the realization that, in saving human lives from a different predator, Ash, Frost, and Willow had laid bare the truth. They were not the savage killers the town had imagined, but a pack bound by loyalty to Evelyn and, by extension, to her community. Evelyn hurried forward, heart in her throat, to usher her wolves back toward her cabin. Trembling with residual adrenaline, she murmured quiet praise to each of them, tears threatening at the edges of her vision. The forest around them seemed to exhale, the crisis defused without a single bullet or lethal act, merely the force of presence and a subtle, unspoken alliance. As the men and onlookers dispersed, none could deny the magnitude of what they had witnessed. The dangerous wolves they'd once condemned had intervened, not out of mindless aggression, but to repel a bigger threat. When daylight finally broke, its gentle rays revealed a clearing still marked by tension. Yet the pre-dawn terror had receded. Jack, emerging from the shadows with camera still in hand, quietly shared the footage he'd captured. Ash standing guard against the monstrous predator, the men hesitating to fire, circulated across local channels and social media. The video redefined the wolves' narrative. Viewers who had once reviled them marveled at the unwavering stance they'd taken, not attacking humans but rather protecting them in a moment of crisis. The fear that had once ruled the town began to ebb, replaced by a collective reckoning with how prejudice and panic can blind a community to an animal's true nature. In the days that followed, a measured calm spread through the area. Officers continued to investigate the unknown predator. which some believed had retreated deeper into unpopulated woods or possibly succumbed to injuries. Farms remained on alert, but the outcry for Evelyn's wolves to be culled or removed quieted substantially. For many, the memory of that night served as a humbling lesson about the complexity of wild creatures and the flawed assumptions people make under the weight of fear. Evelyn, for her part, was left with a profound sense of both relief and awe. She had put her faith in the wolves' bond with her, risking everything on the hope that they would not revert to nature red in tooth and claw. Now, she saw them not only survive the final confrontation, but also disprove the doomsayers who'd labeled her insane years ago. She found herself inundated with apologies, from neighbors who had once scorned her decision, from local officials who had threatened to remove the wolves. Even the land developer, long an advocate for ridding the area of large predators, quietly backed away from his inflammatory rhetoric, though not without leaving a lingering wariness in the air. Looking out one morning at Ash and Frost and Willow as they played under the pines, Evelyn felt an unshakable gratitude for how far they'd come. 5 years earlier, she had been just a solitary figure rescuing 3 orphaned cubs, ridiculed and cast as a danger to public safety. Now, she and her wolves stood together as living proof that a boundary between the human world and the wild can be bridged by empathy, careful stewardship, and a willingness to trust. The trials they had faced, while painful, had forged a stronger bond than she ever thought possible, and for once, the biggest skeptics were those left admitting they had been wrong about her all along. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of devotion, courage, and the indomitable bond between a woman and her wolf pack. If Evelyn's story and the remarkable transformation of Ash, Frost, and Willow have inspired you, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support is vital in our mission to promote understanding and protect wildlife everywhere. Stay tuned for more moving stories that show how even the wildest souls can share an extraordinary connection with humanity, challenging stereotypes and proving that hope can emerge even where everyone else sees only danger.